Chapter 1: The Fateful Bet. The seaside resort owned by Ethan Harrington was hosting one of the most extravagant parties of the year, where elite business figures and high society gathered. The lively music blended with dazzling lights, expensive champagne bottles popped open one after another, and wealthy guests laughed and chatted animatedly. Ethan, a millionaire who had just turned 30, stood in the middle of the party, a glass of wine in hand, a careless smile on his lips. He was tall, charismatic, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, exuding the aura of a man who had everything: money, fame, and absolute freedom. Beside him were his two closest friends, William Lancaster and Jason Brooks, both from wealthy families. However, everyone knew that compared to Ethan, they were merely standing in his shadow. William smirked. "Ethan, I bet you'll never get married. You always see marriage as a joke." Jason laughed. "And rightfully so. Who would give up a luxurious bachelor life just to tie themselves down to one woman?" Ethan took a nonchalant sip of his wine, his deep blue eyes gleaming with challenge. Ethan shrugged. "Marriage is just a contract on paper. If I wanted to, I could marry anyone." William and Jason exchanged glances before William suddenly came up with a wild idea. William smirked. "If that's the case, dare to prove it." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Prove what?" Jason, feigning indifference. "That you can marry a poor girl, not for love, not for money, just to prove that marriage is nothing but a farce." William, taunting. "If you marry a random girl right now, we'll bet $1 million on it." Ethan laughed, thinking it was nothing more than a drunken joke among men who had grown bored of their extravagant lives. But deep inside, his pride was stirred. $1 million meant nothing to him, but proving that marriage was just a game? Now that was interesting. Ethan smirked confidently. "Fine, choose someone. I'll marry whoever you pick." At that moment, in a luxurious beachfront cafe, Sophia Monroe was busy serving customers. She wore a simple dark blue apron, her brown hair neatly braided, revealing a delicate, beautiful face. At first glance, she seemed like just an ordinary waitress, but there was something distinctly different about her. William scanned the cafe and immediately came up with an idea. William, pointing at Sophia, "Her, that waitress." Jason, laughing loudly. "Perfect. A broke, working-class girl. She'll probably lose her mind if a millionaire proposes to her." Ethan raised an eyebrow, observing the girl his friends had chosen. There was something intriguing about her. Unlike the women who constantly tried to attract his attention, Sophia didn't even glance at him once. She remained focused on her work, completely uninterested in the group of wealthy men at the VIP table. And that made Ethan curious. He stood up and walked toward the counter where Sophia was checking receipts. She looked up, her gaze unexpectedly calm when she saw Ethan Harrington, the powerful man everyone admired. Ethan, smirking. "I have a proposal for you." Sophia, raising an eyebrow. "If you're ordering more drinks, I'm sorry, but we don't serve alcohol after 10 p.m. Ethan, chuckling. "Not drinks. A marriage." Sophia, stunned. "What did you just say?" Ethan leaned against the counter, his gaze filled with challenge. "Ethan, marry me, right now." Sophia blinked, silent for a few seconds before suddenly laughing, not in an embarrassed or flustered way, but with a mysterious and sharp amusement. "Sophia, you're proposing after less than a minute of meeting me?" Ethan, nodding confidently. "Exactly. I'm rich. I can guarantee you a luxurious life. Isn't that what every girl dreams of?" Sophia, studying him carefully. "You're making a bet with your friends, aren't you?" Ethan, pausing slightly. "How did you know?" Sophia, smirking. "You're not the type of man who believes in marriage. It's written all over your face." Ethan was taken aback. This girl was too sharp. But what shocked him even more was that Sophia nodded in agreement. Sophia, "Fine. If you want to marry, I'll marry you." Ethan couldn't believe his ears, but he wasn't one to back down. Ethan, smiling, "Then let's go." A luxurious limousine was already waiting, taking Ethan and Sophia to a small chapel nearby. The bride wore a simple white dress borrowed from a store down the street, while the groom remained in his expensive suit. The priest looked at them with suspicion, but when Ethan pulled out a thick check, he stopped asking questions. Priest awkwardly smiling. "Are you both absolutely sure about this decision?" Ethan calmly. "Absolutely." Sophia, with a mysterious smile. "More certain than ever." As the wedding rings were exchanged, Ethan felt that something was off, but he didn't care. It was only after everything was done that he realized one crucial detail he had overlooked. The marriage contract they had just signed was legally binding. They were now truly husband and wife. Welcome to Soul Stories, Puker. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like, and follow means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a yes in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter, together. The pale sunlight. The soft morning sunlight filtered through the thick curtains, casting hazy streaks of light onto the marble walls. The vast penthouse perched atop a towering skyscraper made the entire city below seem like nothing more than tiny glowing dots. In the luxurious bedroom, a king-sized bed draped in high-end silk stood at the center, its pillows neatly arranged, except for one side, which was slightly disheveled, a sign of a restless sleep. On the table near the window, an abandoned bottle of fine wine sat beside a glass, with only a few drops remaining, reflecting the golden morning light. And on the long sofa across from the bed, a woman sat, legs elegantly crossed, a delicate porcelain coffee cup resting between her slender fingers, as if she belonged in this world. Did I really marry a waitress? Ethan frowned slightly, squinting as the sunlight woke him. His head ached, not from alcohol, but from the sheer madness of the previous night. He turned his head and the first thing he saw was Sophia. There was no panic, no confusion, no sign of a poor girl who had just won the lottery overnight. She was sipping her coffee, her gaze calm as she looked out at the city skyline, as if she had lived here all her life. Her body leaned slightly against the back of the chair, legs crossed in perfect elegance, utterly at ease. The slightly oversized white shirt she was wearing, clearly Ethan's, draped lightly over her slender shoulders, carrying an air of casual sophistication. Her hand lifted the coffee cup effortlessly, her wrist tilting at the precise angle of refinement, as though she wasn't merely sipping coffee, but indulging in a five-star hotel breakfast. Impossible. Is she really just a waitress? Ethan sat up, his sharp gaze scanning her. Ethan, blinking, clearing his throat. What are you doing here? Sophia slowly lowered her coffee cup, her deep brown eyes sweeping over him with an unreadable calmness. Sophia, lifting her gaze, her tone light yet filled with meaning. You're my husband. Of course, I'm here. Ethan froze for a second. My husband. Those words echoed strangely in his mind. He threw the blanket aside and stood up. His expensive suit from the previous night was discarded in a corner, leaving him in nothing but a wrinkled dress shirt. Yet despite the disheveled look, the aura of a man accustomed to power remained in every movement. Ethan strode toward her, towering over her. Ethan, frowning, You're supposed to be shocked or freaking out. Sophia gently placed the coffee cup on the table, then looked up at him, her gaze disturbingly steady. Sophia, smirking softly, did you expect me to panic? Ethan hesitated. This was not the reaction he had anticipated. She didn't tremble, didn't avert her eyes. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, a faint, enigmatic smile gracing her lips, as if she was enjoying the situation rather than fearing it. She's really not afraid? Not excited, not terrified, just perfectly composed. Ethan lowered his gaze, observing her every movement. Sophia showed no signs of tension. Her shoulders were relaxed, her arms at ease, every motion precise and controlled. Ironically, it was Ethan who felt unsettled. He inhaled deeply, resting a hand on the glass table nearby, then leaned slightly toward her. Ethan, narrowing his eyes. I thought you only agreed because you wanted my money. Sophia didn't flinch. She remained seated on the sofa, her legs gently swinging in a leisurely manner before she slowly turned toward him. Sophia, smiling lightly, if I wanted your money, I would have asked for a credit card first. Ethan stiffened. For the first time in his life, he felt off balance in a conversation. Not just because of what she said, but how she said it. Her tone wasn't defensive, nor was it playful. Instead, every word was delivered with effortless grace, calm, precise, and razor sharp. Ethan stared at her, searching for a clue, a flicker of greed, a hint of fear, a trace of pretense, but he found nothing. Only a woman, smiling lightly, her eyes filled with secrets he couldn't yet decipher. Who exactly is she? Ethan took a step back, his gaze colder. He was used to reading people within minutes, whether they were cunning businessmen or women only interested in his wealth. But Sophia was different. She wasn't a poor girl thrilled to have married a millionaire. She wasn't a gold digger waiting for privileges. She simply sat there, observing him, as if he was the one being studied. Ethan did not like this feeling. Damn it, I thought I was the one controlling this game. But what if I'm the one being played? He didn't know the answer, but he knew one thing for sure. This woman was anything but ordinary. The more Ethan observed, the more something felt off. Every morning she maintained strange habits, drinking black coffee with no sugar, reading economic news on a newspaper instead of scrolling through a phone. She wasn't in a hurry to blend into the luxurious life he had. Ethan was starting to feel unsettled. Who is she really? He decided to test her. Ethan brought Sophia to an exclusive high society gala, a gathering of top businessmen, aristocrats, and politicians, a world completely foreign to any ordinary woman. His plan? To watch her struggle in a room full of powerful figures, to see if she could fit in, and most importantly, to see if she would embarrass him. No waitress could possibly be comfortable in an event like this. Ethan pulled up to the Grand Hotel entrance where the gala was being held. Stepping out of his sleek luxury car, he adjusted the collar of his tailored suit. Sophia stepped out right behind him, wearing a sleek sapphire blue dress, simple yet perfectly accentuating her silhouette. Nothing too extravagant, nothing attention-seeking. Yet she exuded an effortless elegance. All right, at least she had good taste. Inside the grand ballroom, the chandeliers sparkled against the clinking of expensive champagne glasses, classical music drifting softly in the background. Ethan waited for her to falter, waited for her to hesitate in the presence of seasoned tycoons, waited for her to be overwhelmed by a world she didn't belong to. But what he hadn't expected, Sophia walked in as if she belonged there. No awkwardness, no hesitation, no sign of a poor girl stunned by wealth and power. The way she held her wine glass, the way she greeted people, the way she smiled with quiet confidence, everything was too perfect. Ethan stood at a distance, observing his wife carefully. How could a waitress move with the grace of a high society heiress? Then he saw her in conversation with James Wellington, a real estate tycoon. Not only was she listening intelligently, but she was also responding with precision and finesse. James, smiling, raising his glass. Are you interested in the investment market, Sophia? Sophia, returning the smile, lifting her glass slightly. Real estate does have potential, but personally, I believe any investment needs a long-term strategy. James, intrigued. Oh? You seem quite knowledgeable. Sophia, smirking slightly. I simply enjoy learning about it. Ethan nearly dropped his wine glass. When Sophia stepped away, Ethan moved beside her, keeping his voice steady. Ethan, lowering his voice. What the hell was that? Sophia, raising an eyebrow. I was just having a conversation. Ethan. No, you weren't just talking. You spoke like, you've done this 100 times. Sophia, smirking lightly. Maybe I'm just naturally good at it? Ethan studied her, searching for a crack in the illusion. But there was none. She was not ordinary. His entire life had been spent among schemers, accustomed to reading even the smallest expressions and gestures to determine who was trustworthy and who was merely pretending. When he decided to marry Sophia in a reckless bet, he was convinced that she would soon reveal her true nature. A poor girl marrying a millionaire surely wouldn't be able to hide her naivete in the face of high society's lavish lifestyle. But Sophia was nothing like he expected. She wasn't overwhelmed by his wealth. She wasn't eager to embrace luxury. She didn't seem desperate to claim the privileges that came with this marriage, and she certainly wasn't flustered at the extravagant gala they had attended. Ethan began to feel uneasy. He decided to test her, to put her in situations no ordinary woman could navigate unless she had been trained for it. That evening, Ethan took Sophia to one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city, a place where having money wasn't enough. One also needed to understand the most refined dining etiquette. He wanted to see if she would falter when faced with an array of cutlery, intricate haute cuisine dishes, and the strict protocols of fine dining. As they stepped inside, crystal chandeliers cast a shimmering glow over baccarat wine glasses, and the air was filled with the soft hum of jazz. Guests dressed in formal evening attire sat on plush velvet chairs, exchanging conversations that the average person would struggle to follow. Sophia took her seat, her gaze sweeping over the table setting. 7 knives, 6 forks, 4 spoons, each designated for a different course. Ethan sat across from her, watching her every move. The waiter placed the first course, a delicately plated foie gras, before them. Without a moment's hesitation, Sophia picked up the correct knife and fork, slicing the foie gras with effortless precision. Her movements were fluid, natural, as though she had done this hundreds of times. Ethan narrowed his eyes, but he wasn't convinced yet. The next course was a refined seafood bisque, served with a uniquely designed silver spoon. Someone unfamiliar with high-end dining etiquette would likely make a small mistake, either by picking the wrong spoon or stirring incorrectly. Sophia made no such errors. She held the spoon with perfect finesse, scooping a small portion of soup without making a sound, and placed the spoon back onto the plate without clinking it against the china. Ethan began to feel a strange discomfort. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. Sophia set down her spoon, her brown eyes glinting with amusement. "I just observe and follow," she replied, a faint smile playing on her lips. Ethan did not believe that. A few days later, Ethan took Sophia to an exclusive art auction. Some of the world's most valuable paintings were being showcased, drawing in the wealthiest and most cultured collectors. He wanted to see whether she had any knowledge of art, or if she would simply stand there cluelessly. They entered the grand hall where masterpieces by Renoir, Monet, and Picasso adorned the walls. Seasoned collectors murmured about the works, using complex art terminology that no ordinary person would understand. Sophia walked up to a painting by Jean-Léon Gérôme, an artist less known among casual admirers. She tilted her head, studying the painting for a long moment before smiling softly. "This piece reflects 19th century Orientalism," she remarked. Gérôme had an incredibly detailed style, but was also influenced by classical realism. Ethan froze. Beside him, an older art collector looked at Sophia with genuine admiration. "The young lady seems quite knowledgeable about fine art," he noted, surprised. Ethan said nothing, gripping his wineglass a little tighter. Sophia continued to move through the gallery, her eyes lighting up as she approached a piece by Degas. "The way he plays with light here is brilliant," she mused. Ethan realized something unsettling. She wasn't pretending to understand art. She genuinely did. Every single test, Sophia passed effortlessly. She was confident but not arrogant. She was poised but not pretentious. She was knowledgeable without flaunting it. A quiet unease crept into Ethan's mind. He had believed he was in control of this situation, but now he was the one being led in circles. Who exactly was Sophia? Ethan didn't know, but one thing was certain. He was going to find out. 1 week after the wedding, Ethan, William, and Jason met at an exclusive private club, a place where only the elite of society could set foot. The luxurious room was adorned with velvet-covered walls, a grand crystal chandelier casting a warm golden glow. At the center, an exquisite bar displayed rare, expensive liquor, serving only the most powerful men in the city. Ethan was absent-mindedly swirling his whiskey when William set his glass down with a sharp clink against the table. We need to talk. Ethan glanced up, raising an eyebrow at William. Jason sat down beside William, his expression unusually serious. About what? Ethan asked, his voice dripping with indifference. William crossed his arms, eyes narrowing at Ethan. Do you really believe your wife is just a poor waitress? Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second, but quickly scoffed. What else would she be? She's definitely not the hidden daughter of a billionaire, if that's what you're thinking. Trust me, I checked her background. Sophia Monroe works at a beachfront cafe. Nothing special. Jason nodded slightly, but doubt still clouded his face. But if she's just an ordinary waitress, then why does she act like a perfect aristocrat? Ethan leaned back into his seat, taking a slow sip of his drink, his voice laced with mockery. Maybe she was just born with natural elegance? William let out a low chuckle, but it was one of mock amusement rather than agreement. Natural elegance? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Are you seriously suggesting that a cafe waitress just happens to know how to use silverware like nobility? That she somehow discusses art like a seasoned collector? Or understands financial markets like an expert? Ethan didn't respond immediately. His grip tightened subtly around his glass. Jason chimed in, his tone unwavering. There's no way a poor girl would act like that. Ethan shot him a warning glance. What exactly are you trying to say? William smirked, shrugging slowly. Just that. If your wife isn't who she claims to be, then maybe she's playing you. Ethan didn't like the sound of that. He let out a sharp laugh as if William had just told the most ridiculous joke he'd ever heard. How the hell could a waitress possibly fool me? But the moment the words left his mouth, he felt less certain. Sophia was too mysterious. She was too composed. She was too intelligent. She was too perfect. Not once had he seen her hesitate, fear, or falter. Even when stepping into a world that should have been entirely foreign to her, or so he had thought, she had never wavered. Ethan had always been the one in control of the game, but now for the first time, he had the unsettling suspicion that he was the one being played. He could dismiss William and Jason's words, but the seeds of doubt they had planted in his mind, those would not be so easy to erase. When Ethan returned to the penthouse, the first thing he saw was Sophia standing on the balcony, her dark brown hair gently swaying in the night breeze. She was gazing down at the glittering city lights, a wineglass in hand, her silhouette so effortlessly poised that she looked like a painting brought to life. Ethan's footsteps slowed as he observed her. There was something about Sophia that made it impossible to look away. A part of him wanted to believe she was just a lucky woman, someone who had stumbled into his life through a reckless bet. But another part whispered that Sophia Monroe was no coincidence. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer. Sophia turned at the sound of his approach, her deep brown eyes meeting his, without a hint of surprise. You look like you have a lot on your mind, she remarked, her voice smooth and light. Ethan tilted his head slightly, his gaze lingering on her soft lips before moving back up to her eyes. Just thinking about interesting things, he replied, half truth, half tease. Sophia took a small sip of wine, the corner of her mouth curving slightly. Is that so? Ethan stared at her, searching for cracks in her perfect mask. But Sophia just smiled, effortlessly, naturally, as if she had nothing to hide. Yet Ethan knew, a woman with this many mysteries always had something to conceal. The question was, did he truly want to know? And if the answer was yes, was he ready to face the truth? Chapter 3. The Secret Unraveled. Ethan never sat still when he had doubts. He had spent his entire life reading people, knowing when they were lying, understanding what made them tick. But Sophia Monroe was an exception. She didn't just confuse him, she made him question himself. Everything about her was strangely perfect. Not the kind of perfection that came from trying too hard, but a natural, effortless grace, as if she was born to belong in this world of wealth and power. And Ethan knew there was something not right about the woman he had married. So he started watching her more closely, and the more he watched, the more he realized she was not just any ordinary girl. One evening, as they dined at an exclusive French restaurant, the waiter, mistaking Sophia for a local, spoke to her in rapid French. Without a moment's hesitation, she responded flawlessly, not with the awkward stiffness of someone who had learned from textbooks, but with the natural elegance of a Parisian aristocrat. Ethan's knife paused mid-cut, his sharp blue eyes narrowing. "You speak French?" Sophia simply smiled, lifting her wine glass. "Just a little hobby." Ethan did not believe that. No one learned flawless French just for fun. Sophia wasn't just knowledgeable about art and investments. She had a deep, refined understanding of multiple fields. At a private wine tasting event, she effortlessly identified the grape variety, harvest year, and even the specific climate conditions of the vineyard. Details even seasoned collectors struggled with. Ethan watched as industry experts nodded in astonishment at her insight, and for the first time, he felt something unsettling creep into his gut. "How does a cafe waitress know all of this?" he asked bluntly on their way home. Sophia shrugged, her expression unreadable. "Maybe I'm just good at observing." The same half answer, the same evasiveness, and Ethan's doubts deepened. Ethan began noticing a pattern. Sophia frequently received mysterious phone calls at night. She would always step out onto the balcony, speaking softly, her tone far more serious than her usual calm demeanor. One evening, Ethan stood by the door, listening through the small gap. "No, I'm fine. He hasn't suspected anything." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He? Who was she talking about? "Just wait a little longer. I'll take care of this." Take care of what? Ethan stepped forward, acting as if he had just walked in. "Who was that?" he asked casually. Sophia flinched, just for a second, before quickly masking it with her usual composure. "Just an old friend." Ethan did not believe her. No one spoke to an old friend with that kind of tone. One afternoon, as Ethan sat in his car near the downtown district, he caught sight of Sophia walking toward a luxurious mansion. This wasn't a house belonging to anyone he knew. His curiosity piqued. Ethan slowed down, parking at a safe distance, watching as she walked through the grand gates. Two black-clad guards stood at the entrance, clearly security personnel. Sophia didn't hesitate. She didn't even glance around. She entered as if she belonged there. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. She had told him she knew no one in this city. But clearly, she was connected to a world he knew nothing about, and Ethan intended to find out the truth. 2 days later, with the help of an old acquaintance in security, Ethan finally obtained information on the mansion's owner. The name on the records was Charlotte Monroe, one of the most influential figures in the finance world. Monroe? That name wasn't unfamiliar. Ethan dug deeper, and when he uncovered the full truth, he could hardly believe it. Sophia Monroe was not a poor girl. She was the heir of the Monroe dynasty, one of the wealthiest families in the city. Ethan felt as if someone had punched him straight in the face. How the hell had this happened? She wasn't some ordinary woman caught in his reckless bet. No, she had been playing this game with him from the very beginning. Chapter 4, The Ultimate Question. Who's deceiving who? Ethan Harrington stepped into the penthouse, his mind heavier than it had ever been. For the past 2 days, he hadn't stopped thinking about what he had just discovered. Sophia Monroe was not just a cafe waitress. She was the heiress to the Monroe family, one of the most powerful dynasties in the city. Yet she had hidden her true identity all this time. She hadn't just lived as an ordinary woman. She had willingly stepped into this marriage, almost as if she had planned this from the very beginning. The door clicked shut behind him. In front of him, Sophia stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights casting golden reflections on her skin. She didn't look surprised to see him return with a cold, unreadable expression. She knew he would figure out the truth, and that only made Ethan even more furious. "So do you want to keep playing this game, my dear husband?" Ethan strode toward her, his icy blue eyes locking onto hers. "You lied to me." Sophia still wore that faint, enigmatic smile, but there wasn't a trace of regret in her gaze. "And if I told you I was just as much a victim in this marriage as you were, would you believe me?" Ethan clenched his jaw. "Don't play games with me, Sophia. You knew from the start. You agreed to marry me for a reason." Sophia crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly, unfazed by his sharp tone. "So, Do you want to keep playing this game, my dear husband? Ethan froze for a split second. Her tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't a casual joke. It was a real challenge. There was something deeper behind her words, but right now Ethan wasn't in the mood to decipher it. I don't like being played. His voice was low, dangerous. Sophia smirked, stepping closer. And yet, here you are. Ethan's fists clenched. Then tell me, what was the real reason? Why would a Monroe heiress agree to marry me? Sophia's smile slowly faded. She turned away, walked to the bar, and poured herself a glass of wine. Then she finally spoke. Because I needed a shield. Ethan blinked. Sophia turned back, her sharp gaze cutting through the space between them. Do you think my family would ever let me be free? I am the only heir to the Monroe dynasty, but the real power in the family isn't mine. They have already planned everything for me, including my future. She took a sip of wine, her tone calm, yet laced with bitterness. Aunt Charlotte wants me to marry a man she can control. If I refused, she would have found a way to push me out of the family. And when I heard about your ridiculous bet, she let out a quiet chuckle, setting her glass down. I thought, why not use it to my advantage? Ethan's mind spun. You mean? Sophia cut him off. You thought you were the one making the rules, Ethan. But in reality, you were just the pawn I chose. Her words ignited a wildfire of anger inside him. He had believed he was the one in control, that Sophia was a random girl caught up in his bet. But now he realized he was the one who had been played. You used me from the start. Ethan laughed, but there was undeniable fury in his voice. So this was your plan all along? Sophia didn't flinch under his gaze. I only took advantage of an opportunity placed right in front of me. Ethan took a step closer, forcing her to look up at him. So what now? His voice was low, controlled, yet undeniably dangerous. Should I just end this marriage right now? Sophia held his gaze for a long moment, then suddenly let out a soft, amused laugh. You can, if that's what you want. She traced the rim of her glass absent-mindedly. But I hope you don't. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Why? Sophia tilted her head, her gaze challenging. If I divorce you now, Charlotte will immediately force me into another marriage. But as long as I remain Mrs. Ethan Harrington, she won't dare touch me. Ethan stared at her, his mind caught in a storm of confusion. She's asking me to keep this marriage? You're joking. Sophia shrugged, her expression unreadable. I don't need anything from you, Ethan. I just need a title to protect myself. And you can enjoy having a beautiful wife who never interferes in your life. Ethan remained silent. What Sophia was saying wasn't entirely unreasonable. If he divorced her now, the bet would be exposed. His reputation would take a hit. But if he kept the marriage, nothing in his life would change, except for one problem. He hated feeling like he was being manipulated. Ethan should be furious at her. He should want to throw her out for lying to him. But there was one undeniable truth. Sophia was different from any woman he had ever met. She didn't cry or beg for forgiveness. She didn't make excuses. She stood in front of him, fearlessly admitting everything. No one had ever dared to play a game like this with Ethan Harrington. And strangely, that only made her even more fascinating. Ethan stared at Sophia for a few long seconds. She didn't look away. She was waiting to see what he would do next. He took a deep breath. So if I decide to keep this marriage, what does that mean? Sophia's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile, her brown eyes gleaming with a dangerous spark. It means the game continues, Ethan, but this time you'll have to ask yourself. She leaned in slightly, voice barely above a whisper. Who's really in control of the board? Ethan's chest tightened. He had no idea what he had just agreed to. But one thing was certain. The game had just become far more interesting. Chapter 5. Schemes in the Shadows. Ethan stood by the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling window, his piercing gaze overlooking the glowing city below. The streetlight stretched like a golden web, but tonight he paid no attention to the view. Behind him, Sophia sat on the long couch, one leg elegantly crossed over the other. She watched him silently, a glass of red wine resting in her delicate hand. her deep brown eyes unreadable. Ethan turned around, slowly walking toward her. "Tell me, Sophia, why did you choose me?" His voice was low, edged with danger. Sophia set her glass down on the glass coffee table, tilting her head as she studied him, her usual enigmatic smile still present. "Because you're the only man who could make Charlotte cautious." Ethan's eyes narrowed at the mention of her aunt. "Charlotte? What does she have to do with this?" Sophia took a slow, deep breath, as if finally ready to reveal the truth. "Charlotte Monroe is not just my aunt. She is the one who controls the entire Monroe empire. She intends to keep that power forever, and I am the greatest threat to her plans." Ethan lowered himself onto the couch across from her, his sharp gaze locked onto hers. "Keep talking." Sophia swirled her wine, her voice calm but laced with bitterness. "If I married someone of my family's choosing, my husband would be under Charlotte's control. That would effectively remove me from the line of succession. And that's exactly what she has been planning for years." Ethan frowned. "How would that even be possible?" Sophia sighed. "My parents died when I was young. Charlotte became my legal guardian. But according to my father's will, once I turned 25, I would automatically inherit 40% of Monroe Corporation, making me the majority shareholder." Ethan's expression darkened with understanding. "If you take control of the company, Charlotte loses her position." Sophia nodded. "Exactly. But she couldn't just take my inheritance outright. That would be too obvious. Instead, she planned to marry me off to a man she could control." Ethan leaned back, folding his arms. "And Gregory is part of this, isn't he?" Sophia let out a soft, mocking laugh. "Gregory is Charlotte's most loyal puppet. He's desperate to prove himself worthy of inheriting the Monroe fortune. But the truth is, he never had a chance. Charlotte promised him that if he helped her eliminate me, she would give him a significant share of the wealth." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a murmur. "For years, Charlotte has controlled every aspect of my life, ensuring I had no relationships beyond the ones she approved of." Ethan let out a low, humorless chuckle. "And then you met me, a reckless millionaire who doesn't believe in love and was foolish enough to get trapped in a ridiculous bet." Sophia's smile widened slightly, her brown eyes glinting with sharp intelligence. "I didn't choose you just because of the bet. I chose you because you are Ethan Harrington." Ethan stilled. "What do you mean by that?" Sophia placed her glass down and leaned on the armrest, meeting his gaze head on. "You are a man Charlotte cannot control. You are powerful, intelligent, and, most importantly, you have no ties to my family. If I married you, she couldn't force me into another marriage. And most of all," she paused, letting her words sink in before finishing, "you're the only man who could make Charlotte wary. Because unlike everyone else, she cannot manipulate you." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then suddenly burst into laughter. "So I'm not just a pawn in your game. I'm also your shield." Sophia didn't flinch at the accusation. "You can think of it that way if you want. The truth is, I had no other options. I was hiding, living under the identity of a cafe waitress. And then, your bet happened. I simply used it to my advantage." Ethan shook his head, but the anger that had burned inside him earlier was now cooling into something else. Sophia had used him. That was undeniable. But when he looked at her, he saw no deception, no false innocence. She wasn't pretending to be weak or playing the victim. She had looked him in the eye and told him everything. And that made her even more fascinating. A dangerous proposition. Ethan stood and walked toward the window, his hands in his pockets. "Maybe I should divorce you right now." Sophia remained composed. She simply watched him, her expression unreadable. "If you do, I will lose everything." Ethan turned to face her. "You seem awfully calm about that possibility." Sophia shrugged, her tone casual. "I've already prepared for every outcome. If you truly want to walk away, I won't stop you." Silence. Ethan could leave. He could end this game right now, but a part of him didn't want to. Not because of his pride, not because of the bet, but because he didn't want to leave Sophia to face her family alone. The thought startled him. He had never considered himself the type of man who would want to protect anyone. But Sophia Monroe wasn't just anyone. And maybe that was why he couldn't walk away. He took a step toward her, his voice low and deliberate. All right, Sophia, I'll keep this marriage. For the first time, surprise flickered in Sophia's eyes. Are you sure? Ethan smirked, but his smile held a dangerous edge. But if I'm playing this game, you better remember, I won't be the one getting played. If Charlotte or Gregory want to start a war, then let them know. His voice dropped lower. I have my own rules. Sophia let out a soft laugh, as if she had been expecting this answer all along. Then Ethan Harrington, let's play this game together. They held each other's gaze, silent yet completely in sync. This marriage was no longer a gamble. It was an alliance, a battle, and Ethan knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't just be a spectator in this game. He would be the one to change the rules. Chapter 6. Love or Just a Game. Ethan Harrington had once believed that pretending to love a woman would be simple. He was used to playing the role of the perfect man in public. His past relationships had always been short-term games, devoid of any real emotions. But with Sophia Monroe, things were entirely different. Not only did they have to appear as a loving couple in front of the media, but they also had to convince her family, a group of people eagerly waiting to expose their facade. To Ethan, it was supposed to be just another move in their game. Yet the more he played the role of a devoted husband, the harder it became to control his own emotions. Sophia wasn't just intelligent, she possessed a quiet, icy pride that made him want to conquer her. The problem was, he wasn't sure if he was still pretending. One afternoon at a Monroe family charity event, Ethan stood a short distance from Sophia, his champagne glass in hand, his eyes fixed on her. She was engaged in conversation with Brandon Carter, a brilliant lawyer, and one of the men Charlotte had once tried to arrange for Sophia. Ethan didn't like the way Brandon looked at his wife. He didn't like how the man leaned slightly toward her, how he smiled at her with familiarity. Most of all, he didn't like how Sophia smiled back. A strange feeling, one that he had never experienced before, coiled in his chest. Before he could think it through, Ethan closed the distance between them. Without hesitation, he slid a hand around Sophia's waist, pulling her firmly against him. Sophia's breath hitched as she turned to look at him, her brown eyes filled with silent questioning. Brandon, too, looked surprised, but quickly masked it with a polite smile. Ethan, Brandon greeted smoothly, I was just having a very interesting conversation with your wife. Ethan's grip tightened slightly around Sophia's waist. His voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable edge of danger. Is that so? Unfortunately, I need my wife right now. Sophia blinked, surprised by his possessiveness, but she didn't pull away. Brandon gave a knowing smirk, his gaze flickering between them as if assessing Ethan's territorial display. I suppose we'll continue our conversation another time then. Only after Brandon disappeared into the crowd did Sophia turn to Ethan, eyes narrowing. Ethan, what the hell was that? Ethan still hadn't let go. His hand remained on her waist, his thumb tracing small, unconscious circles against the fabric of her dress. He looked down at her, his voice low and rough. I didn't like the way he was looking at you. Sophia's breath hitched for a second. Are you jealous? Ethan's smirk twitched, but he didn't answer. Because for the first time, he didn't have a good excuse. The shifting lines between pretend and reality. Since their marriage, Sophia had always kept her distance. She knew Ethan wasn't emotionally invested in this union. She knew he had only agreed to play along for his own reasons. But lately, something had changed. He protected her in public, stood beside her at every Monroe family event, deflected suspicions, and played the role of a devoted husband so well that even Sophia was beginning to doubt what was real and what wasn't. But most of all, his touches, they weren't just for show anymore. There was something different in the way his fingers brushed against her waist, the way his hand lingered at the small of her back. And then there was the way he looked at her. One evening, Sophia had been trying on gowns for an upcoming gala. As she adjusted the fabric, she heard a soft knock at the door. Come in, she said absent-mindedly, expecting one of the staff. Instead, Ethan stepped inside. She turned, catching his reflection in the mirror as he leaned casually against the doorway. His blue eyes slowly traveled down her figure and then stayed. Sophia's heartbeat stuttered. She had worn countless elegant dresses before, but for some reason, the way Ethan looked at her now made her feel different. She swallowed. "How does this dress look?" Ethan walked toward her, stopping just inches away. His fingers grazed the fabric near her shoulder, his touch so light that it sent a shiver down her spine. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "It looks beautiful, but I don't think you need a dress to be captivating." Sophia's breath caught. Ethan was a natural flirt. She knew that. But this didn't feel like flirting. It felt like something else entirely. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if he was still playing the game. Chapter 7, The Counterattack. The Grand Monroe Gala was in full swing, its air filled with chatter, clinking glasses, and polished social niceties. But Ethan knew tonight was more than just a social gathering. Gregory had a plan, and so did he. Ethan had known for a while that Gregory wasn't just competing with Sophia. One evening at a private club, he had overheard a conversation, one that changed everything. A man's voice, low and confident. "Everything is in place. Once the party starts, the evidence of embezzlement will be released. She'll lose everything." Gregory's mocking laugh had followed. "Good. I want her removed from the game. Right here, in her own home." Ethan had clenched his glass so tightly it almost shattered. Sophia would never do such a thing. If Gregory had evidence, it was fabricated. And Ethan wasn't about to let that happen. From that moment, he worked in the shadows, tracing Gregory's manipulated documents, infiltrating Monroe Corporation's financial records, and hunting down the source of Gregory's so-called evidence. And when he finally found what he was looking for, solid proof that Gregory had staged everything, he knew exactly how to strike back. Tonight, at Gregory's chosen battleground, Ethan would turn the tables. He stood beside Sophia, his hand casually resting on his glass of whiskey, but his gaze was fixed on Gregory's every movement. Gregory moved with his usual cocky demeanor, raising his glass in forced politeness. But Ethan saw it, the way his eyes flickered toward a man in a black suit across the room. Ethan recognized him, Gregory's accomplice. And then, the moment arrived. A man stepped onto the center stage, his voice smooth, his smile practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid this evening isn't just a celebration. I have in my possession some very serious documents, ones that concern the so-called heir of the Monroe family." A hush fell over the room. Beside him, Sophia stiffened, her fingers tightening around her champagne glass. Ethan reached for her hand. Gregory smirked, eyes gleaming with triumph as the man continued. And then, the screen behind them flickered to life. But what appeared on the massive LED display wasn't what Gregory had planned. It wasn't evidence against Sophia. It was evidence against Gregory. The room fell into chaos. Displayed for everyone to see were leaked emails proving that Gregory had orchestrated the scheme, financial transactions showing how he had manipulated records to frame Sophia, and most damning of all, a recorded conversation. The very same conversation Ethan had overheard at the club. "Everything is in place. Once the party starts, the evidence of embezzlement will be released. She'll lose everything." Gregory's face drained of color. His hands trembled as whispers rippled through the crowd. Ethan stepped forward, his voice cool, controlled, and deadly. "I think we all know now who the real traitor is." His gaze locked onto Gregory, his blue eyes as sharp as steel. "Congratulations, Gregory. Your plan was flawless, except for one thing. You forgot that I'm always one step ahead." The silence was deafening, and in that moment, Gregory realized he had lost. Sophia stood frozen in disbelief. Ethan had just publicly protected her, not out of personal gain or as part of their game, but because it was her. She could see it in his eyes, a rare sincerity Ethan had never shown before. For the first time, Sophia didn't know how to respond. She had thought Ethan saw this marriage as nothing more than a reckless gamble, but now standing before her family in the heart of the Monroe Empire, he had defended her as if it meant everything. And that changed everything. As the party concluded, Ethan walked through the dimly lit corridors of the Monroe mansion. He was waiting, and Charlotte didn't disappoint. She stood at the end of the hall, her expression cold as ice, her piercing gaze sharp as a knife. "Name your price." Ethan arched an eyebrow. "For what?" Charlotte exhaled, her voice low and deadly. "How much do you want to leave Sophia and disappear from her life?" Ethan let out a short, humorless laugh. "So this was her game?" Charlotte took a step forward. $50 million. Sign the divorce papers, and the money is yours immediately. Ethan didn't even glance at the number. She thought he was just another man who could be bought. She thought he had married Sophia as a joke, but that was no longer the truth. He looked Charlotte straight in the eye, his voice as cold as her own. "Do you really think I need your money?" For the first time, Charlotte hesitated. Ethan stepped closer, his presence imposing. "I may have married her because of a bet," he said, his voice dangerously low. "But I'm not joking when I say I will protect my wife." Charlotte's fingers curled into fists. Ethan didn't give her the chance to respond. He turned, walking away, leaving her standing there. Powerless. Chapter 8. The Confession and the Ending. The night was silent, but Sophia's mind was not. She sat by the large window, watching the moon cast soft shadows on the polished floor. She lifted a glass of red wine to her lips, but the bitter taste did nothing to drown out the thoughts whirling in her head. Ethan Harrington had not divorced her, even though he easily could have. Even though he could have walked away with an obscene amount of money, but he didn't. She needed to know why. Ethan entered the room, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his posture relaxed, yet something in his eyes was unreadable. When he saw her watching him, he raised an eyebrow. "You're still awake?" Sophia didn't answer immediately. She set down her glass, her deep brown eyes locking onto his. Then without hesitation, she asked, "Why didn't you divorce me?" The question hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Ethan stilled. He had expected this question. He knew it was only a matter of time. He stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate, before leaning down, his hands resting on the armrests of her chair, so close that she could feel his breath against her skin. His voice was low, husky. "Do you really want to know?" Sophia didn't flinch. "Yes." Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then, in a voice that sent a shiver down her spine, he whispered, "Because I love you." The world seemed to stop. Sophia's breath hitched, her mind struggling to process his words. Ethan Harrington? Saying he loved her? That was impossible. A disbelieving laugh escaped her lips. "You're joking, right?" Ethan didn't smile. "I've never been more serious in my life." Sophia shook her head. "Ethan, this marriage started as a game. How can you say you love me?" Ethan's hands gripped the chair tighter. "Yes, at first I thought this was just a game," he admitted. "But day by day I realized you're not like anyone I've ever met. You're strong. You're brilliant. You don't need me to survive, yet somehow I want to be the one by your side." Sophia stared into his deep blue eyes, searching for any trace of deception. But there was none, only raw honesty. She wanted to argue, deny, walk away. But then memories came flooding back. Ethan stood by her side against her entire family. He rejected Charlotte's offer, choosing her over money. He risked everything to expose Gregory's schemes. No one had forced him to do that. No one had told him to protect her, but he did. For her. Sophia took a deep breath, voice soft but steady. "Are you sure?" Ethan didn't even hesitate. "I love you, Sophia, and I don't want this marriage to be a game anymore." Sophia stood, closing the space between them, her heartbeat pounding. She could feel the warmth of his body, could see the certainty in his gaze. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "No one has ever been this good to me before." Her brown eyes held a vulnerability she had never allowed herself to show. "I grew up surrounded by luxury, but after my parents died, I understood what loneliness truly meant. The Monroe family pretended to care for me, but in reality, they only wanted me gone. I was nothing more than an inconvenience, a piece on their chessboard." Sophia's voice broke slightly, her shoulders trembling. "No one has ever fought for me. No one has ever truly protected me. Until you." A single tear slipped down her cheek. Ethan didn't hesitate. He reached for her, pulling her into his arms, wrapping her in a fierce, protective embrace. She buried her face against his chest, her voice muffled. "Thank you, Ethan." He stroked her hair, his touch gentle, as if reassuring her without words. After a long moment, Sophia lifted her head, her tear-filled eyes filled with trust. Then, without thinking, she rose on her toes. Her hand rested against his chest, her breath slightly unsteady. And for the first time, she made the first move. She pressed a soft kiss against his lips. A touch that was tentative, yet filled with everything she couldn't put into words. Gratitude, trust, and something deeper. Ethan didn't move, as if afraid to shatter the moment. When she pulled back, their eyes met, and in the silence between them, they both knew this wasn't just a fake marriage anymore. It never had been. The scandal that had rocked Monroe Corporation made headlines the very next morning. With all the evidence laid bare, Charlotte had no choice but to expel Gregory from the Monroe family. His fall from grace was swift and merciless. He was stripped of all power, kicked out of the company, and left with nothing. As security escorted him out of Monroe Group's headquarters, hatred burned in his eyes. He turned back, his gaze locking onto Ethan and Sophia, his voice seething with fury. "You'll regret this." Ethan smirked, pulling Sophia closer. "No, Gregory. The only one regretting anything here is you." Gregory clenched his jaw but had no choice but to walk away, empty-handed, defeated. Sophia let out a quiet breath beside Ethan. Finally, it was over. With Ethan's support, Sophia officially assumed control of Monroe Corporation. She was no longer a pawn in her family's schemes, no longer afraid of Charlotte, no longer under anyone's control. Now she was the one holding the power. Ethan sat beside her as the board of directors declared her the rightful heir to the Monroe Empire. Under the table, he reached for her hand. A gentle squeeze, a silent promise. She looked at him, her lips curving into a small smile. For so long, she had thought she had to fight alone. But now, she knew she never had to be alone again. That night, back at their penthouse, Sophia turned to Ethan. "Do you regret it?" Ethan frowned slightly. "Regret what?" "Marrying me." He let out a low chuckle, pulling her into his arms. "Sophia, if I could go back and do it all over again, I'd still marry you. But this time, not because of some stupid bet." He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "I'd do it because I want you to be my wife." Sophia's heart stilled for a moment, and then it swelled. She rested her head against his chest, eyes closing. For the first time in so long, she felt safe. Ethan wasn't just the man she had married as part of a plan. He had become the man she loved, and this marriage was no longer a game. It was the most important thing in their lives. The New York skyline stretched in front of them, painted in deep blues and golden lights. Ethan stood on the balcony, holding a glass of whiskey, though he had no intention of drinking it. He looked down at the city below, a city that never slept. But here in their penthouse, with Sophia beside him, there was a rare sense of quiet. Sophia joined him, this time without any walls between them. She leaned lightly against the railing, exhaling softly. "Did you ever think it would end like this?" Ethan placed his glass down, turning to face her. "I wasn't sure, but I do know one thing." She glanced at him, curiosity in her eyes. "What's that?" Ethan took her hand, his expression more sincere than ever. "I don't want to lose you." Sophia said nothing, but her heart, it skipped a beat. This marriage was never supposed to exist. It had started with a reckless bet, a manipulative plan, and a challenge to fate. But in the end, it had become the most real thing in their lives. Before Sophia, Ethan had never believed in marriage. He had seen too many loveless unions in the world of the wealthy. Relationships built on power, money, and convenience, never on love. But then Sophia Monroe walked into his life, and she was unlike anyone he had ever met. She never tried to seduce him, never tried to manipulate him, never chased after his money. Instead, she was a force he couldn't turn away from. She was so strong that he couldn't ignore her. So brilliant that she made him want to be a better man. Once Ethan had lived only for pleasure, but now he wanted to be a man Sophia could trust, a man who could protect her, not because of a game and not because of a gamble, but because he truly loved her. Her whole life, Sophia had fought. She had fought against her family's control, against Charlotte's schemes, against a life others had tried to dictate for her. She had once believed that she had to protect herself alone, but now she realized she didn't have to be alone anymore. Ethan wasn't just her husband on paper. He had fought for her. He had defied her family for her. He had chosen her, even when he had every reason to walk away. For the first time, she felt safe, not because she had secured her inheritance, but because she had Ethan. The next morning, as they stepped into Monroe Corporation together, people looked at them differently. No longer as a suspicious couple, no longer as two people trapped in a game, but as true partners. Sophia squeezed Ethan's hand, this time not out of necessity, but out of choice. Ethan leaned down, his voice soft and teasing. "I think we should have a real wedding." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. "Not for a bet, not for a contract, but because I actually want to marry you." Sophia looked up at him, and for the first time she smiled without hesitation. "I want that too." Once, they had thought of themselves as players in a game, but in the end, they had found something real, not in sweet promises, not in perfectly scripted romance, but in the way they stood beside each other, through every battle, every betrayal, every storm. Ethan tightened his hold on Sophia's hand, pulling her into him. Under the glowing city lights, they shared a kiss, not as two people playing a game, but as two people who had finally found their fate. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.